Commander James Weber stood at his office window in the underground Earth Defense Command, staring at the artificial sky screens that simulated a peaceful morning. 6 months had passed since Earth's victory over the Dominion fleet, and now the politicians wanted answers. The summons from the Galactic Council sat on his desk, its holographic seal rotating slowly, casting blue shadows across the metal surface. He remembered that day clearly, the day Earth's long-prepared defenses were finally put to the test. The memory pulled him back to that crucial moment. "Sir, deep space sensors have detected something massive approaching the Kuiper Belt." Weber had been expecting this call for 20 years. He turned away from his morning coffee and faced the young officer, Tom, who stood nervously in the doorway. "Show me," he said simply. The command center buzzed with controlled energy as Weber entered. On the main screen, thousands of red dots moved in formation toward the solar system. Each dot represented a Dominion warship, part of an empire that had conquered 300 worlds without a single defeat. "They're not even trying to hide their approach," said Weber's second-in-command, Lieutenant Ray Miller. "They think we're primitive enough not to notice them." Weber allowed himself a small smile. Earth's carefully crafted image as a backwater world had worked perfectly. For 50 years, humanity had maintained the appearance of a species barely capable of reaching their own moon, all while building the most sophisticated defensive network in known space. How long until they reached the outer defense grid? Weber asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd run this simulation countless times. 18 hours, sir, replied the sensor officer. "They're moving exactly as our predictions suggested they would." Weber nodded and pressed his palm against the command table's authentication scanner. The table hummed to life, projecting a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Invisible to their enemies, layers of defensive systems appeared as ghostly blue lines throughout the projection. "Send the sleeper signal," Weber ordered. Across the solar system, hidden bases on Mars, Venus, and various asteroids began their activation sequences. Underground hangars that hadn't seen light in decades started powering up their ships. "Sir," Miller spoke up, "shouldn't we warn them? The Galactic Conventions require us to warn aggressive forces before engaging in combat," Weber interrupted. "But we're not engaging. Not yet. We're simply preparing our defenses." He paused, looking at the faces around him, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The Dominion made their choice when they entered our system without notification or permission. Warning lights suddenly flashed across the command center. The enemy fleet had increased speed. They expected to find a helpless civilization, ripe for conquest. Instead, they were heading straight into humanity's carefully laid trap. Weber walked to the center of the room, his voice carrying to every corner. "For 3 generations, we've prepared for this day. Our ancestors chose isolation, chose to appear weak, all to give us this advantage. The Dominion thinks they're hunting prey, but they've walked into the den of a predator." He turned to face his crew, his expression firm. "Send word to all bases. Operation Sleeping Giant is now active. Let's show them why you never corner a human." The room erupted into focused activity. Outside, deep beneath the Earth's surface, massive machinery began to move. Weapon systems older than most of the crew powered up, and ships that had never seen combat prepared for their first and most important battle. As Weber watched his people work, he felt a deep pride. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced humanity. They had never faced a species that turned paranoia into an art form, that planned for every possible scenario, that spent generations preparing for this exact moment. The next few days would change the galaxy forever. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Weber already knew he would be standing before the Galactic Council, explaining why humanity had chosen this path. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, he had a war to win. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched upward for what seemed like miles, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 3 artificial suns. Commander Weber stood at the center of the speaking platform, a small figure surrounded by towering seats filled with representatives from 50 different spacefaring civilizations. Above him, the Dominion ambassador, a tall figure in black armor, pointed an accusing finger. "The humans are barbarians," his voice boomed through the chamber. "They violated every rule of civilized warfare. They used trickery, deception, and forbidden weapons." Weber waited calmly, hands clasped behind his back. He'd faced down an invasion fleet. An angry ambassador didn't frighten him. The head counselor, an ancient being with silvery skin, raised a hand for silence. "Commander Weber, you stand before this council to explain Earth's actions during the recent conflict. The charges are serious. How do you respond?" Weber stepped forward. The platform beneath his feet lit up, indicating it was his turn to speak. He looked up at the gathered aliens and smiled slightly. "Honorable Council," he began, his voice clear and steady. "Before I explain our tactics, let me tell you a story about humanity. For thousands of years, we fought ourselves. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. While other species were reaching for the stars, we were learning the art of war in the hardest possible way, by fighting ourselves." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Most species had unified before reaching space. Humanity's path was unusual. "When we first detected alien signals," Weber continued, "we were thrilled. But we were also cautious. You see, we'd already imagined every possible way first contact could go wrong. Our stories, our movies, our books, they were full of scenarios where humanity faced alien threats. So we watched, and we listened, and we learned." The Dominion ambassador interrupted. "This is irrelevant. They hid their true capabilities." "Yes, we did," Weber agreed calmly. "We learned about the Dominion's expansion. We saw how they treated primitive species, so we made a choice. While our diplomats showed you our old chemical rockets and basic space stations, our real work happened in secret. We built our defenses underground, underwater, and in hidden bases across our solar system." The head counselor leaned forward. "You deliberately appeared weak? For how long?" 50 years, Weber replied. 3 generations of humans dedicated themselves to creating the perfect defense, all while appearing to be nothing more than a young, struggling species." Shocked whispers filled the chamber. The idea that an entire planet could maintain such a deception for so long was unthinkable to most species. "But why?" asked a representative from a peaceful trading species. "You could have joined the galactic community. We would have protected you." Weber's expression hardened slightly. "Like you protected the Centauri worlds, or the Rigel colonies. We watched as the Dominion took world after world. We saw how the Council's protection always came too late." The chamber fell silent. The recent failures to stop the Dominion's expansion were a sore point for many council members. "We chose isolation because it gave us time," Weber explained. "Time to prepare, time to build, time to plan. Yes, we appeared weak. Yes, we hid our true capabilities. And when the Dominion attacked us without provocation, thinking we would be an easy conquest." He paused, looking directly at the Dominion ambassador. "Well, they learned that appearances can be deceiving." The head counselor signaled for attention. "You will now explain these preparations and the specific tactics used against the Dominion fleet." Weber nodded. "I will. But I warn you, what you're about to learn will change how you view humanity forever. We didn't just prepare to defend ourselves. We turned our entire solar system into a weapon." As Weber began to detail Earth's defenses, he noticed several council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They were about to learn why challenging humanity had been the Dominion's greatest mistake. Weber activated the holographic display in the center of the council chamber. The solar system appeared in miniature, with the Dominion fleet shown as a mass of red dots approaching Earth's outer defenses. "The Dominion fleet entered our system expecting to find a few primitive orbital platforms," Weber continued. "And that's exactly what we showed them." The display zoomed in on Earth's orbit, showing simple satellites and a few basic space stations. Several council members nodded. This matched their own records of Earth's capabilities. What they didn't know, Weber said, pressing another control, was that we had spent decades preparing our first line of defense. The hologram changed, revealing countless tiny dots scattered throughout the solar system. We called it Operation Spider's Web. The Dominion ambassador stood up sharply. Cloaked minds. That's forbidden by Article 7 of the Galactic Conventions, Weber finished for him, which specifically bans cloaked explosive devices. But these weren't explosive devices. He zoomed in on one of the dots. They were gravity manipulators. The head counselor leaned forward. Explain. Each device created a microscopic gravitational distortion, Weber said, harmless on its own. But when triggered in sequence, he activated a recording from the battle. The council watched as the confident Dominion fleet advanced. Suddenly, ships began to break apart. Metal twisted and crumpled as invisible forces pulled them in multiple directions at once. The ships weren't destroyed by explosions, Weber explained. They were torn apart by gravity itself. The conventions never banned gravity weapons because most species considered them too primitive and power-intensive to be practical. A scientific advisor spoke up. The energy requirements for such a network would be enormous. Weber nodded, which is why we spent 30 years building solar collectors inside Mercury's orbit, disguised as natural debris. The power was there, waiting to be used. The recording continued, showing Dominion ships trying to retreat, only to find themselves caught in more gravitational traps. The council chamber was silent except for the sounds of destruction from the hologram. This is barbaric. The Dominion ambassador shouted. You could have demanded our surrender. Weber's voice turned cold. Like you demanded surrender from the Centauri colonies before destroying them. No, we learned from your example. When someone threatens your world, you don't take chances. He zoomed out the display again. The gravity web took out 30% of your fleet. But that was just the first layer of our defenses. You see, while your ships were distracted by the obvious threats, they missed what was happening in the outer solar system. A hologram shifted to show the Kuiper Belt. What looked like normal ice and rock movements suddenly revealed a pattern. We didn't just defend Earth, Weber said quietly. We weaponize the entire solar system. Every asteroid, every chunk of ice, every piece of space debris. We had mapped and prepared them all. For 50 years, we carefully adjusted their orbits by millimeters, setting up the perfect kill box. A council member from a military species spoke up. That's why you kept claiming your deep space missions failed. You weren't failing. You were building this trap. Exactly, Weber confirmed. Humanity has always been good at learning from our mistakes, but we're even better at learning from the mistakes of others. We watched as world after world fell to the Dominion. We saw how they overcame planetary defenses, fleet ambushes, and last-ditch resistance. He shut off the hologram, leaving the chamber in dim light. So we didn't build just one defense. We built layers upon layers, each designed to make you focus on the wrong threat while the real danger approached. The gravity web wasn't meant to stop your fleet. It was meant to make you think you'd discover our best weapon. The head counselor's voice was grave. And what was approaching from the outer system? Weber smiled grimly. That, council members, is where the true horror of human warfare begins. The holographic display in the council chamber flickered back to life, showing the damaged Dominion fleet regrouping after their encounter with the gravity web. Weber let the scene play for a moment before speaking. The Dominion admiral made his first major mistake at this point, he said. He assumed we had spent all our resources on defense. After all, our ships were primitive, barely able to reach Mars. Weber's lips curved into a slight smile. Or so everyone thought. He pressed a control, and the image shifted to Mars. The red planet's surface seemed normal, until suddenly massive doors began opening in the ground. From deep underground bases, ships emerged, hundreds of them. their black hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. While you watched our clumsy rockets struggling to reach orbit, Weber continued, we were building our real fleet underground. On Mars, on the Moon, even in the asteroid belt. We hid them in plain sight, under the surface of every major body in our solar system. The Dominion ambassador slammed his fist on his podium. Impossible. Our scans showed no power signatures, no construction. Of course not, Weber replied calmly. Because we didn't use modern power sources. We went primitive. Incredibly primitive. He zoomed in on one of the Earth ships. These ships ran on chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. No energy signatures to detect because we deliberately used technology that was centuries behind the galactic standard. The Council watched as Earth's hidden fleet emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system. The ships were ugly, brutal things, more like floating fortresses than the sleek vessels of other species. But these primitive ships, Weber continued, had one major advantage. They didn't rely on energy shields or complex targeting systems. They couldn't be shut down by electromagnetic pulses or shield disruptors. They were simple, sturdy, and absolutely lethal. The recording showed the first engagement. The Dominion ships fired energy weapons, expecting easy kills. Instead, the human vessels simply absorbed the hits with their thick armor and kept coming. We built our ships like ancient sea battleships, Weber explained. Multiple layers of armor, compartmentalized sections, and enough backup systems to survive almost anything. But that wasn't their real purpose. The Council members leaned forward as the human ships launched their attack. Instead of energy beams or plasma torpedoes, they fired what looked like solid metal slugs. Railguns, Weber said. Incredibly basic technology. Just metal projectiles accelerated to extreme speeds. No shield ever designed could stop a tungsten rod moving at relativistic speeds. The Dominion found this out the hard way. The recording showed Dominion ships being torn apart by the primitive but devastatingly effective weapons. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were useless against solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. But the ships were just the beginning. Weber continued. Remember those asteroids we had been positioning for 50 years? The ones everyone thought were just failed mining attempts. The hologram expanded to show the outer solar system again. Hundreds of asteroids, some as large as mountains, began to move. They had engines attached to them. Simple, crude engines that had laid dormant for decades. We turned them into kinetic kill vehicles, Weber said quietly. Each one aimed at precise coordinates, accelerated by gravity, assists we had calculated decades in advance. The Dominion fleet found itself caught between our ships and mountains of rock, moving at orbital velocities. The head counselor's voice was barely a whisper. How many ships did they lose? In the first hour of our counterattack, over 60% of their remaining fleet. They had never faced an enemy who would turn entire asteroids into weapons. They had no defense against it because no species had ever been willing to spend 50 years setting up a single attack. Weber paused, looking at the devastation displayed in the hologram. But even this wasn't our most devastating weapon. The real horror, the thing that truly broke the Dominion's will to fight, was still to come. Weber touched a control, and the hologram changed to show the surviving Dominion ships regrouping after the asteroid assault. Their once perfect formation was now ragged and disorganized. Physical weapons weren't our only advantage, Weber said. For 50 years, we had studied every species in the galaxy. We learned your cultures, your beliefs, and most importantly, your fears. He pressed another button. The chamber's speakers crackled to life with a sound that made several council members flinch. Human laughter. Not just any laughter, but a carefully crafted mix of sounds that ranged from children's giggles to deep, menacing chuckles. This was our psychological weapon, Weber explained, stopping the recording. We broadcast this on all Dominion frequencies during the battle. Simple human laughter. The Dominion ambassador's face had turned pale. You knew. Yes, Weber said quietly. We knew that in Dominion culture, Laughter is only associated with victory in combat, with domination over the weak. We knew that hearing the laughter of what you thought was a primitive species while your ships were being destroyed would be unsettling. The hologram showed Dominion ships breaking formation as the laughter continued to echo through space. Some ships fired randomly into empty space, while others clustered together defensively. But that was just the beginning. Weber continued. We had studied the Dominion military structure carefully. We knew that ship commanders were expected to fight to the death. That retreat meant disgrace. So we deliberately left escape routes open. A council member leaned forward. You allowed them to retreat. Why? Because a dead enemy can't spread fear, Weber replied simply. Those who retreated told stories of the horror they had witnessed, of primitive humans who laughed while destroying mighty warships with rocks and metal, of a species that spent generations preparing ways to kill them. A hologram showed escaped Dominion ships fleeing through the solar system. Each carried with them recordings of the battles, of the laughter, of the destruction. We made sure some of them escaped after each wave of our attack, Weber explained. Each group carried back stories more terrifying than the last. We wanted the Dominion to learn that humanity wasn't just fighting back, we were enjoying it. The head counselor's voice shook slightly. This was not just warfare. This was calculated psychological torture. No, Weber corrected. This was survival. We didn't just want to win the battle. We wanted to make sure that no one would ever think of attacking Earth again. He gestured at the hologram, where Dominion ships scattered in panic as more human vessels emerged from hiding. Every human child for 3 generations grew up knowing they might need to fight aliens one day. Every piece of technology we developed was designed to appear harmless while hiding a deadly purpose. We turned our entire civilization into a weapon. The chamber fell silent as Weber let his words sink in. The hologram showed the final stages of the battle, where Dominion ships were running into each other trying to escape the solar system. The physical damage to their fleet was severe, Weber concluded, but the psychological damage, that was absolute. The Dominion's own battle recordings spread across the galaxy. Everyone saw how a primitive species had not just defeated them, but had planned that defeat for 50 years. He looked up at the council members, his eyes hard. But even this wasn't our final defense. When the Dominion admiral launched his desperate last attack on Earth itself, he discovered why you should never, ever corner a human being. The hologram in the council chamber shifted to show Earth itself, a blue marble floating in space. The remaining Dominion ships, less than 20% of their original fleet, had gathered for one final, desperate attack. The Dominion admiral made his last mistake here, Weber said, his voice growing quiet. He thought that after using our best weapons, after revealing our hidden fleets and asteroid weapons, Earth itself would be defenseless. He was wrong. The display zoomed in on Earth's magnetic field, showing it as a shimmering blue shield around the planet. For centuries, scientists thought Earth's magnetic field was natural. Weber continued. We let everyone believe that. But the truth. He pressed a control, and the hologram revealed massive devices buried deep in Earth's core. We had been modifying our planet's magnetic field for decades. The Dominion ambassador stood up sharply. That's impossible. No species can control a planetary magnetic field. Impossible. Weber smiled. Let me show you what happened when your admiral led his final assault. The hologram showed the Dominion ships approaching Earth. They were still powerful enough to destroy most of the planet's surface. As they entered the upper atmosphere, Weber pressed another button on his control panel. Earth's magnetic field suddenly pulsed. The pulse was invisible but devastating. Dominion ships began to spin out of control as their navigation systems failed. Their energy weapons powered down, and their shields flickered out of existence. We didn't just modify our magnetic field, Weber explained. We turned it into the largest electromagnetic pulse generator ever created. One pulse, and every piece of advanced technology in near-Earth orbit simply stopped working. The Council watched in stunned silence as the mighty Dominion warships, now powerless, began falling from the sky. They burned up in the atmosphere or crashed into the oceans, defeated not by weapons, but by Earth itself. While your ships relied on advanced electronics and energy systems, we had prepared our ground defenses with technology so old it was considered obsolete. Weber continued. Mechanical computing systems, analog targeting devices, things that couldn't be shut down by electromagnetic pulses. The hologram showed Earth's surface as massive gun batteries emerged from hidden bunkers. They were completely mechanical, powered by systems that hadn't been used in warfare for centuries. When your ships lost power, Weber said, they were targeted by weapons they couldn't detect because they were too primitive to register on their scanners. The few ships that survived the pulse were destroyed by simple projectile weapons, fired from mechanical computers that couldn't be hacked or disabled. The head counselor's voice trembled. You turned your entire planet into a trap. Yes, Weber agreed. Every mountain could hide a weapon. Every ocean could conceal a base. We spent 50 years making sure that even if an enemy reached Earth itself, they would never be able to take it. The hologram showed the final moments of the battle. The remaining Dominion ships, those few that had stayed beyond the pulse's range, fled the solar system. They carried with them recordings of their mighty fleet being defeated not by superior technology, but by weapons their scanners had dismissed as harmless. The entire attack lasted less than 6 hours, Weber concluded. The Dominion lost their largest fleet not to a superior force, but to a species they had dismissed as primitive. We didn't just defeat them. We showed the galaxy that appearances can be deceiving. He looked up at the council members, his expression grave. But there's one more thing you should know. One final secret that will explain why Earth must never be threatened again. The council chamber had grown very quiet. The hologram showed Earth, peaceful once again, with no sign of the devastating battle that had taken place. Commander Weber stood calmly, waiting for the right moment to deliver his final revelation. You've shown us your defenses, the head counselor said slowly. You've explained your tactics. What more could there possibly be? Weber smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Tell me, honored council members, why do you think we chose to reveal all of this? We could have claimed our victory was luck. We could have kept our methods secret. The chamber stirred uncomfortably as his words sank in. The truth is, Weber continued, the Dominion fleet discovered only one of our defense systems, one of many. He pressed a final control on his panel, and the hologram expanded to show the entire galaxy. Different colored lights began appearing on various worlds, space stations, and trade routes. For 50 years, while we pretended to be primitive, we sent out thousands of missions. Most of them failed, as far as the galaxy knew, but they didn't fail. They were never meant to reach their public destinations. The Dominion ambassador's voice shook. What did you do? We built more defense networks, not just around Earth, but everywhere. Weber gestured at the lights. Every major military base in Dominion space has dormant gravity traps around it. Every significant fleet anchorage in the galaxy has hidden kinetic kill vehicles waiting in distant orbits. We didn't just prepare to defend Earth. We prepared to defend ourselves against everyone. Shocked gasps echoed through the chamber. The head counselor stood up. This is an act of war against the entire galaxy. No, Weber corrected firmly. This is survival. Humanity spent 50 years watching the galaxy. We saw how the strong dominated the weak. We saw how treaties were broken, how promises were ignored. So we made sure that if anyone ever tried to destroy us, they would destroy themselves in the attempt. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various council members. Every species in this room has hidden weapons pointed at Earth. Every civilization has plans to deal with primitive humanity if we become a problem. We simply return the favor. The hologram showed more details. Hidden bases in asteroid belts, dormant weapons platforms disguised as space debris, and entire fleets of ships waiting in the darkness between stars. We don't want war, Weber said quietly. We never did. All we want is to be left alone. But if anyone ever attacks Earth again, they won't just face the defenses you've seen today. They'll find their own weapons turning against them, their own systems failing, their own worlds threatened. The council chamber erupted in angry shouts and frightened whispers. The head counselor raised his hands for silence. "And what would you have us do with this information, Commander Weber?" Weber straightened his uniform. "Nothing. Do absolutely nothing. Go home to your worlds. Look at your military bases, check your fleets, and know that somewhere, watching and waiting, humanity has made sure that any attack on Earth would be suicide." He switched off the hologram, leaving the chamber in dim light. The Dominion thought they were invading a primitive world. Instead, they discovered that humanity had spent 3 generations preparing for every possible threat. They learned what you now know, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the one with the most advanced weapons. Weber's voice carried to every corner of the silent chamber. "It's the one that's willing to spend 50 years planning your destruction, just in case you ever become a threat. That's humanity's real crime, isn't it? Not that we won, but that we showed the galaxy what true preparation looks like." As Weber turned to leave the chamber, he delivered his final words. "Let the Council's verdict reflect this truth. Earth doesn't need the galaxy's protection. The galaxy needs protection from Earth."